My husband traded our vows for my sister's attention, promising I'd fade quietly. Instead, I stacked proof each month like bricks toward a quiet detonation. 4 years later, a child stepped from behind me with his father's eyes and said one word that turned my ex's grin into stone. "You're watching Revenge Files. Subscribe for a new twist daily." I was 29 the spring my husband, Tyler Reed, moved his clothes into my sister Brenna's apartment and told me, "You're strong, you'll be fine." He left an empty dresser, a half-paid mortgage, and a checking account lighter by $6,400. He also left me 9 weeks pregnant. I didn't cry when the door shut. I wrote the withdrawal amounts in a narrow column on a yellow legal pad and circled the day he moved out, April 2, 2021. The first contradiction arrived before the ultrasound photos dried. Tyler posted beach shots in Charleston with Brenna while texting me that his business was struggling. He ran Reed Pro Build, a small contractor in Charlotte, North Carolina. He said work was slow and he couldn't help right now, but his caption bragged about closing a 6-figure deck deal. I printed the post, the timestamp, and the text thread. Proof mattered more than rage. I called Mecklenburg County Child Support Services the day I heard the flutters. The intake worker spoke gently and laid out the steps. File, serve, test, calculate. 4 verbs. I could live inside 4 verbs. I filled the application that night, attached our 2019 and 2020 returns, and wrote Tyler's last known address in block letters. The clerk date-stamped it May 10, 2021, but then, the sheriff's return came back unable to serve. Tyler had moved from Brenna's apartment to a rental he put under his LLC. Certified mail bounced. He wasn't refusing the pregnancy, he was refusing the envelope that would make the pregnancy expensive. I kept receipts, postal slips, tracking numbers, and on my lawyer's advice, filed a motion to allow service by publication. 3 weeks, the clerk said. It felt like 3 winters. I gave birth to a boy on November 30, 2021, in a room washed with morning light and beeping. I named him Jonah because his face looked like a second chance even as I shook. He had Tyler's eyes, gray when the light was thin and bright when it wasn't. The nurse placed him on my chest, and I felt something click into position that had been wobbling since April. On the birth certificate under father, the line stayed blank. The hospital offered a packet about voluntary acknowledgement. I slid it into a folder labeled later. Tyler texted once, 2 days after Jonah came home. "Hope you're good," he wrote. "We'll figure money when things stabilize." There was a photo of a charcuterie board and Brenna's hand with a new bracelet. Stabilize was a funny word to use while standing on someone else's floor. I maxed my grocery list with the precision of a quartermaster. I taught at a public elementary school in Plaza Midwood and picked up 2 after-school reading groups for an extra $220 a month. The mortgage company agreed to a temporary forbearance. The bank did not reverse the unauthorized withdrawals. I made a list of needs and a list of would-likes and never confused them. A month later, the newspaper notice finished its run. Tyler had been served by Inc. The court set a hearing for child support in March. He didn't show. The judge entered a default order establishing paternity subject to a DNA test and set temporary support at $642 a month, based on his prior returns and a guideline worksheet. Arrears would start ticking. If he wanted out, he had to step in first. Except, he found a new way to hide. His LLC started paying him owner draws irregularly, so his pay stubs looked like fog. He told child support he made $42,000. The man who posted a new truck in December claimed austerity in March. Numbers tell stories. You only have to listen. That spring, Jonah got croup and I sat in a steamy bathroom at 3 a.m., counting breaths and whispering that we were okay. A neighbor named Grant heard us through the paper-thin wall of our old duplex and left a humidifier on my porch with no note. When I brought it back the next day, he opened the door with paint on his cheek and a surprised smile. I recognized him from yard signs, Halbrook and Sons Construction. He was Tyler's biggest rival in the small world of city bids. They'd circled the same municipal jobs since long before me. "Keep it," he said, pushing the humidifier back. "We all borrow in this neighborhood." His hands were scarred in the way that meant he worked for a living. Jonah grabbed his finger like it had always been there. I started running in the mornings while Jonah slept. 3 laps around Midwood Park let me sort my thoughts. I ran past job sites and learned the language of plywood stacks and permit placards. Reed Pro Build and Halbrook and Sons signs stood like opposing flags. I watched which sites buzzed at 7 and which only woke up at 10. I saw Tyler once, laughing behind a chain-link fence, and felt my stomach pitch. I didn't wave. I took a photo of the permit. By summer, the temporary order had gathered $3,852 in unpaid support. Child support sent a 10-day notice. If he didn't pay, they could garnish, intercept, suspend. The letter said the word contempt without blinking. I highlighted it and slid it into my folder. I did not call him. I did not warn him. He had Brenna for that. But then, I found leverage that didn't come with a pacifier. A school dad who worked at city procurement mentioned that bid documents were public. I filed a records request for Reed Pro Build's pay applications on 3 city projects. The clerk emailed PDFs so large they made my laptop wheeze. The numbers scrolled like a confession. $218,400 in gross draw requests over 6 months. Tyler had signed them with his full name while swearing under penalty of perjury they were true. I printed the signature blocks and set them beside his $42,000 income claim. Stories lined up. My lawyer, Alicia Romero, slid the pages across her desk with her finger tapping a beat. "This is either misrepresentation to child support or tax fraud to the city," she said. "We don't have to call it anything yet. We only have to show that the guideline calculation should change." Her retainer had cost me $30,500, saved slowly in an envelope under my socks. She earned every dollar that day. We filed a motion to modify and attach the pay apps. The court set a hearing for June 15, 2023. I wore a navy dress that didn't show sweat and a necklace my mom had given me when I graduated. Tyler arrived with Brenna, both tan and brittle. He didn't look at Jonah. He didn't look at me. He looked at the papers like they were a trick. The judge listened, read, and recalculated. "Support is set at $772 per month," she said, "with arrears of $7,704 due within 30 days. Wage withholding to Reed Pro Build LLC effective immediately." Her gavel sounded like a lid clicking into place. Brenna's mouth opened and stayed that way. One problem, the LLC was slippery. Tyler paid himself in bursts to dodge consistency. The wage order caught some of it, then missed. A bank levy captured $3,112 one Friday and nothing the next. The driver's license suspension letter went out. Tyler posted a photo of a scooter with the caption "City Life." It would have been funny if it hadn't been true. Grant and I began seeing each other in the spaces between naps and site visits. He learned the rhythm of Jonah's laugh and brought over a wooden truck he sanded smooth so it wouldn't snag little fingers. He never asked about Tyler. He didn't have to. He'd been bidding against him for 8 years. "He underbids, then builds change orders," he said once, rolling a bolt between his fingers. "It looks cheap until it's not, until..." A pre-bid conference popped onto the city calendar for a sidewalk improvement project near the light rail. Estimated value $1.2 million. Both typos and people chase numbers like that. The city had a new compliance checklist this cycle. Contractors had to be current on child support to be considered responsible. The procurement office had linked to a state rule about withholding on public payments. I read the paragraph twice and felt a stillness settle into my bones. The city could garnish before Tyler even touched the money. I printed the notice and stuck it with my court orders. That folder had weight now. It thudded when I set it down. Grant saw it on my kitchen table and said nothing, but he put a hand on it gently like it was a sleeping animal you didn't want to startle. I showed up to the pre-bid conference with Jonah on my hip and a canvas bag of snacks. I didn't need to be there, strictly speaking, but I wanted to hear the words said in the room where Tyler had always felt largest. Rows of men in boots and polo shirts filled plastic chairs. The procurement officer, a woman with a sharp bob and sharper eyes, reviewed deadlines and forms. When she got to responsibility criteria, the room stilled, subtle as a held breath. "Any contractor with a child support delinquency may be deemed non-responsible," she said. "Additionally, state law allows us to intercept public payments for arrears. We will verify compliance before award." I watched Tyler 2 rows forward. His shoulders tensed at the word intercept. Brenna fiddled with a pen. Grant sat on the opposite side of the aisle, elbow on his knee, listening like he always listened. Carefully, completely. He didn't know I was there yet. I slid further back and let Jonah down to stand on the chair. He peered around me with Tyler's eyes and my stubborn chin. When the meeting adjourned, small knots formed, trading notes and cards. Tyler stood with 2 subs, wide gestures, big smile, the show he'd always been good at. He turned to leave and saw me. The smile flickered. His gaze dropped to Jonah, then ricocheted back like he'd touched a hot stove. For a second, we were the only 3 people in Charlotte. "Hey," he said, the word cheap. Hey, I answered, because simple words make liars nervous. He looked at the folder in my hand. He knew what lived inside. We're working it out, he said. Cash flow is tight. That's not a weather pattern, I said. It's a choice. Jonah leaned around my leg and spotted Grant across the aisle. He lit up and waved both arms. Dad! He shouted, pure and thrilled, and the word cut Tyler's smile into pieces as if it had been scored in advance. Heads turned. I didn't stage it. Life did that part for me. Grant looked over and saw us, then hesitated, reading the air like he reads a blueprint. He walked over slowly, measured, not claiming anything that wasn't his to claim. He crouched to Jonah's level first. You did good being quiet, he said, touching the brim of Jonah's baseball cap. Snack time? Tyler stiffened. He calls him Dad? He asked, voice low. He calls the man who shows up what he is, I said. I kept my tone even. Rage takes up too much room in public. But then, procurement posted the shortlist a week later. Halbrook and Sons made it. Reed Pro-Build did not. The notice used the phrase non-responsible and referenced unresolved child support obligations. It also stated that any payments due to Reed Pro-Build on existing city contracts would be subject to withholding for arrears. I printed it and slid it beside the court order and the intercepted check stub. 3 sheets, 1 story. Tyler filed an email complaint, then a longer letter. He accused me of weaponizing our child and sabotaging his business. He CC'd the city attorney. I replied once, attaching the judge's order and the arrears ledger from child support, and copied no one. I didn't add adjectives. Adjectives are for people without documents. He texted Brenna screenshots of photos where Grant was holding Jonah at a fall festival and added captions like, "So this is the narrative now." She forwarded them to me with a and a shrug emoji. In another life, I would have begged her to choose me. In this one, I sent no reply. He filed to modify again, claiming a downturn. Alicia requested updated pay apps through another records request. They told the same story in a different font. On August 2, 2025, the court denied his motion and set a purge, pay $4,592 within 10 days, or face a contempt finding. The order warned of possible incarceration if he failed to comply. I didn't want him in jail. Jail doesn't pay for shoes. I wanted him to understand the price of absence, and then pay it. One problem: 10 days is a short clock when you've built your calendar on delay. Tyler knocked on my door on day 7, hair damp with rain and shirt wrinkled in a way that would have bothered me once. He looked past me like the house might hold answers. I need time, he said. I'm trying is a mood, not a plan. I stepped onto the porch so Jonah wouldn't hear. The porch mattered to me. It's where I'd rocked through fevers and budget math and loneliness without drowning. The court gave you time, I said. You spent it like it was free. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the math teacher who used to correct his estimates with a pencil and a smile. You're really doing this, he said. I'm not doing anything, I said. The system is doing what it does when you don't show up. I handed him a copy of the order with the days counted on a sticky note. He flinched like paper could bite. He paid on day 9. An ACH transfer for $4,592 hit the ledger, and a smaller wage withholding followed. Child support sent me a notice that his driver's license suspension was paused. The purge bought him air. Air is not amnesty. Except, a subcontractor sued Reed Pro-Build in small claims for $1,146 over unpaid invoices. The judgment became public. I didn't file it. I didn't have to. The story was telling itself now, each chapter a form with a stamped date. Procurement flagged it and asked additional responsibility questions for another project. When Tyler responded with half-truths, they asked for clarifications. When the clarifications contradicted prior statements, they asked for documents. When the documents arrived, they copied child support. Grant and I didn't talk about Tyler unless the conversation could be wrapped in 10 minutes. We kept our own lists. Bedtime routines, grocery runs, site hazard logs filed on time. He never tried to rename Jonah's history. He only made the present steadier. When Jonah fell off his scooter and scraped both knees, he cried, "Dad," and reached for Grant, then reached for me, then fell asleep in both our arms. Names can hurt. They can also be a bridge. The mid-roll surge came where I didn't expect it. A city inspector emailed me, as the complaining party on one of my records requests, to say they had referred Reed Pro-Build's pay app discrepancies to the internal audit team. I hadn't accused Tyler of fraud. I had only shown math that didn't balance. The audit office started asking for site diaries and photos. The surety company holding Reed Pro Build's performance bond took notice. A bond claim isn't jail. It's worse for a contractor. It's a scarlet letter stapled to your invoices. On September 9, 2025, the Licensing Board for General Contractors scheduled a compliance review, the kind they frame as routine until your name is on the letter. It wasn't a courtroom exactly, but it had rows and a dais and a seal, which works the same on a person's spine. I sat in the back with Alicia, a notebook, and a bag of raisins for Jonah. Grant sat near a column, close enough to walk Jonah out if he got squirmy. The board asked simple questions that made Tyler sound like he was speaking a second language he only half remembered. Have you been current on court-ordered support since June 2023? Did you disclose the small claims judgment on your renewal? Explain the variance between reported income and city pay applications. He answered with verbs like intend and anticipate. They asked for dates and amounts. I could have answered with dates and amounts. I did not answer. I watched. When they adjourned to deliberate, Tyler turned and saw us again. You could have handled this between us, he said, the words heavy with the fantasy we used to live in, where charm topped numbers like frosting. We tried between us, I said. You chose the rest of this. The board filed back in with faces that said the hard part was over. License renewal is conditioned, the chair read, on proof of current child support compliance, payment of arrears, and submission of corrected financial statements. Failure within 60 days will result in suspension. He slid papers to the clerk, who stamped them with tiny thunderclaps. The surety rep walked over to Tyler after and spoke low. You can always hear the word indemnity even when you can't hear anything else. But then, procurement issued the award for the sidewalk project. Halbrook and Sons won. They also posted a notice that 25% of Reed Pro Build's next city payment, on a different job, had been intercepted and sent to child support. $2,486 applied to arrears. The ledger showed the deposit 2 days later. Numbers can be petty when they want to be. They also keep you honest. After the hearing, in the parking lot, Brenna stood between two cars and lit a cigarette with shaking hands. She never smoked before Tyler. She exhaled and didn't look at me. He told me you were punishing him, she said. I guess this is what accountability looks like. It looks like paper, I said. I felt tired suddenly, like my bones had been doing quiet labor for 4 years and wanted to set the load down. It also looks like bedtime stories and a humidifier. She flicked ash, then studied Jonah, who was tugging on Grant's sleeve and pointing at a plane. He looks like him, she said softly. He looks like himself, I said. And he did. The eyes were borrowed, the will was not. Tyler emailed Alicia asking for a fresh start and proposing a visitation plan. 10 months earlier, he would have gotten a yes. Now the ask came with my terms. Supervised visits at a center downtown for 8 weeks, then step-ups if he stayed current on support and completed a parenting class. No introductions to new partners for 6 months. No social media posts with Jonah's face. Everything in writing. He agreed to all of it in 2 hours. Paper had finally become the language he understood. On the first visit, he sat in a pastel room with low chairs and tried to build a block tower with a boy who shares his eyes but not his history. I watched through a glass that didn't reflect me back. Jonas stacked, giggled, and said again 3 times. He did not say Dad. He didn't say anything else after. He didn't have to. By Thanksgiving, the arrears ledger was nearly clear. Intercepts from public payments had done what pleading could not. The license stayed active under conditions. The bond company closed its file without a claim when Tyler submitted corrected statements. He learned words like reconcile the hard way. I learned that revenge doesn't have to be dramatic to be complete. Sometimes it's just the sound of a ledger zeroing out while a little boy sleeps through the noise. Christmas lights went up down my street in strings that sagged and then caught again, like people. Grant put a train under our tree, and Jonah lay on his stomach to watch it circle, chin on his hands, content like a cat in a sunspot. Round and round, he said, a sing-song I wanted to live inside forever. In January, the city posted a new bid calendar. Halbrook and Sons had 3 projects, Reed ProBuild had 1 smaller repair job with no photos. Grant never gloated. When I teased him about being noble, he said, I'm superstitious. He kissed my forehead and added, also, I don't need to brag when the work brags for me. I believed him. He'd earned belief the old way, showing up so often it stopped being remarkable. The last time Tyler and I spoke alone was in the hallway outside the visit room, the day the supervisor said they could move to the park for an hour. He looked at me like a man visiting the home he'd built and sold by mistake. "I was stupid," he said, a sentence that should come engraved with a late fee. "You were careless," I said. "Stupid would have been me ignoring it. I meant it without acid. I didn't want to carry acid into a spring that had worked this hard to arrive." He nodded and put his hands in his jacket like he was afraid of what they'd do if they were free. Does Jonah ever ask about me?" "He asks about trains," I said. "And dinosaurs." I paused. "He'll ask about you when you give him something true to hold." That landed. You can always tell when truth finds a chair. We parted without ceremony. He walked to a scooter. I watched him weave through cars and thought about the caption under that picture months ago. "Stability isn't weather. It's choices stacked until they act like shelter." It's humidifiers left on porches and court orders paid on time, and men who set trains on tracks and wind them until the circle feels like promise instead of trap. On a warm evening in March, we stood at the light rail stop and watched crews pour new sidewalk panels for the job Halbrook and Sons had won. Jonah held his foam bat and narrated the backhoe like a sportscaster. "Big scoop," he said. The foreman waved at Grant, and Grant waved back, and everything felt small and right. Tyler's crew wasn't there. Somewhere else in the city, he tightened bolts on a smaller job and checked a ledger that no longer bled. Maybe he looked at a calendar with visitation written in his own hand and counted the days like numbers finally meant something. Maybe he called his payroll clerk to ask if the withholding went through. I didn't need to know. My math was here, at the edge of fresh concrete, a little boy saying again to the world, "That day at the pre-bid conference will stay with me, not for the boardroom sting, but for the way Jonah's voice cut through noise without malice." He called the man who showed up Dad, and the room adjusted. The ledger adjusted. Life adjusted. I had stacked proof for 4 years, small bricks of fact, until the quiet detonation knocked loose the right walls and left the load-bearing beams. In the end, revenge looked like a form signed, a payment posted, a project awarded to the crew that would finish it without games. It sounded like a judge reading numbers that fitted together. It felt like setting down a folder that no longer needed to be carried everywhere. I started with a legal pad and a promise to myself. I finished with a child asleep in a room we built, under a roof paid for by work, not wishes. And when I turn off his bedside lamp, I catch my reflection and think about the first night alone after Tyler left, the column of withdrawals, the hush. I didn't fade. I learned the arithmetic of staying.